But we've got some challenges there too, right? I saw them first in the famous BioReality private Facebook group where you were trying to wrangle all the serious TERFs in Australia into one into one tribe. There was a question about whether trans-identified people should be in the group because that didn't work out too well either, did it?
It was pretty ambitious, probably a bit
Mm.
naive. My idea was, well, let's just bring all the different together in one place. So there were women and men, there were Christian conservatives, and there were gender critical trans people. We had four, including Debbie David Hayton.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
There was this other guy who calls himself the lonely transsexual. There was Scott Nugent, and there was this Australian guy, Paulie Johnson.
yeah, he was some trouble, wasn't he?
Kelly J was in there at one point, really kicked off the shit. She made this post, and I approved it, asking the question, excuse me, is there men who think that they're women in this group? Because if there is, I think I might have to leave, or something like that. And oh my God, the comments just went nuts. Everyone was fighting with each other. Like it just went off. It really went off. That was a learning curve. And I didn't even kick all the trans people out at that point. I was like, no, we need their voices. We need
Mm.
the sane trans people to be speaking up about this. But then later on, that guy, Paulie Johnson, I'd had a 2-hour phone call with him at one point. I thought his approach was very interesting. He was married with children, so we know which typology he is. I didn't know that at the time. He is on hormones. He had even made inquiries about getting the surgery, and then he realized what was happening to women's rights, and women's spaces and women's safety. And in protest, he decided that he wasn't going to get the surgery.
In protest, he kept
Oh.
his cock. Is that
Yeah.
was that what he sacrificed for women's rights?
That is such a good point. Anyway, he was meant to be speaking at our Gender Identity in Law conference down in Hobart. It got postponed and postponed because of COVID. And somewhere in that waiting period, he cracked the shits.
Just to interject, crack the shits is an Australian term for threw a tantrum.
So I had posted a screenshot of someone who had had the surgery as an adult and was listing all these terrible complications and terrible mental health as a result of how bad the surgery had gone. And I just sort of posed the question, like, is this ever ethical? Is it ever
Yeah.
ethical to do this? Like, should it be banned for adults as well?
Mm.
And it was a question. Um, I wasn't saying it should be banned, we need to stop this. It was just the question. And he, in the private group, he was just like, you're trying to take away transgender healthcare. And um, that was his major gripe. That seemed to be sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, because he listed some other things as well that, like, I had a rule that so that the group didn't get just clogged up with shit posting. We only posted memes on Fridays, and
Mm.
he didn't like that. He was like, so you're going to pretend that you can work with trans people, with something along these lines. You can
Yeah.
pretend that you're sympathetic to trans people, except on Fridays when you take the piss out of us. Which he kind of has a point. And then he wrote a freaking letter to the Hobart, the Mercury newspaper down in Hobart, like slagging us off and slagging off the forum. And I was just like, right, we can't work with trans people on these issues. issues. They need to go and start their own little gender critical thing. Like, you know, some of them do call themselves gender critical. Go do that, advocate for, you know, better psychotherapy for trans people and for kids with gender dysphoria. Go and do that if you want to, but I don't think we can work with you anymore. So I just removed all of them from the group, including Scott Nugent, who's, you know, pretty harmless.
It's a
Yeah.
conflict of interest, right, at the base. I think I made a post recently that the only reason these trans-identified men are coming into the women's rights space as allies it can only be to get us to compromise. Because when you take our argument to the conclusion, the logical conclusion, we're saying that gender identity is harmful to women and girls. The only thing is to take gender identity out of the law completely, because the law is not a moral agent, it's an administrative agent. And if something's harmful, it really needs to be removed. They need to find other ways to, if they have got some sort of minority vulnerability, they need to argue for it on their own merits, not because they're a type of woman, because they're taking our political capital and our cultural capital, and fundamentally that's unethical.
Live faster, young bad girls do it well. Live faster, young bad girls do it well.